We're live. Are we live?
Not yet.
Not yet. Huge delay. Oh, I totally forgot to get my bubble tea ready. I have the mix. I could have totally done it.
And here we go.
And here we are.
And delayed.
Still?
Yeah.
Oh,
anyway, we're good to go. And a big warm welcome to everyone who's come out today. I'm Bianca Woods, joined by Mark Britz down there waving at you in the corner.
Hi.
And we're senior managers of programming at the eLearning Guild. And today we are here to talk all things writing conference proposals. And what we really like to do is do as much as we can to support people in the community in deciding what they might want to write conference proposals about and in knowing how to craft ones that really stand out from the crowd so that you have the best shot possible of getting onto our programs.
Yeah. And there's the crowd. We get a lot of proposals, so we're here to help.
So what we're going to do today is we're going to give you a quick snapshot of what process that we use for selecting proposals, just so you can get an understanding of what a proposal goes through in between the point where you submit it and the point where you hear back about it. And then we're going to open up the room to questions. And so if you have any questions, feel free to pop them into the chat box here in YouTube, and we'll be happy to answer those.
Let's do it.
All right, so how a proposal becomes a session. Here's the really, really quick version. And Mark, jump in if there's anything I'm missing.
Yeah, let's do it. Let's go.
So basically, when we open up a call for proposals, lots of people submit. For instance, for our event DevLearn, we tend to get about 800 to 900 proposals as of late for what is about 120 odd slots. So our whole process is all about kind of paring those numbers down and then making a really interesting and engaging program with what we have to choose from. So the very first thing we do is we read every single proposal that comes in with real human eyes. We don't use any kind of software to look for keywords. From our perspective, that isn't going to help us get what we need. And so your proposal will get seen by at least 2 members of the team, usually 3.
Mm-hmm.
And at this point, we're evaluating it for, do we think it could just generally be a fit for the program that we're looking to create? And so at this point, we give either a yes, it could be a fit, a no, it's not really a fit, or a maybe. And the maybe tends to be, there's some aspects of it we want to discuss with the group. And because at this point, we're evaluating everything in isolation. We're not talking to each other. We're not comparing and contrasting the different proposals. We're just looking at it by itself. And between Mark, myself, and David Kelly, we all come into learning development from different perspectives. And so we all have a deep background in it, but that background is different for all 3 of us. So sometimes one of us will catch something that the other ones wouldn't, or go, like for me, I might say, oh, well, this is about social strategy and Mark's a real expert in that. I would really love to get his perspectives before I make a final determination on this. So hence the maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Once we go through all of that, the next phase is to start comparing and contrasting our own reviews. So we'll take all 3 of our reviews alongside with some notes we may have made about why we gave it the score we gave it, and pop it into a single document. And anything at this point that's all yeses moves on to the next round. Anything that's all no's stops there. But anything where we're not in full alignment, we take some time to discuss. And like I said, we all come from different areas of L&D, and so that can inform sometimes why we'll each have a different take on a proposal. Then finally, anything that makes it to that final round, because anything that's a maybe, we will settle on a yes or no at this point. Then it comes into us trying to actually build out the real program. So Mark, David, and I, we do not all work in the same place. I actually don't even work in the same country. And some of this stuff we can do really well digitally, but this final stage, we tend to find it works so much smoother if we're all just in the same room and do it all kind of manual and on paper. And you may have seen some photos of this. We tend to tweet pictures when we all get in the same room to do this, of walls with chart paper and a whole bunch of colored Post-it notes. So that chart paper, we use it to make a square for every single session and every single block that we have for the program. And all those Post-its, we print out the key information about all of our yes proposals at that point, put it onto Post-its. The colors are what track they are, and then we start figuring out how to balance the program. Mark, do you want to go into a bit of how we balance the program?
Yeah, there's a lot of factors, right? So, we're always looking for our various tracks that we have for the particular program. We want to make sure that we have balance in terms of the speaker's background, in terms of gender is important to us. There's a great deal of factors that go into making a rich program. And some of those things that we get into are, we have to debate. We have a lot of good decision making as far as bringing what we feel, especially for DevLearn, that balance between the practical and the future leaning space that we want to also be talking about. So again, as Bianca said, it's 120 odd sessions that we have to choose from, anywhere from out of 800. So it does make it tricky. And I think one of the things that you find when you hear back from us, if you didn't make it on the program, is often that you had a really good proposal, but you were one of 18 really good proposals in a particular space, in a particular track, for example, or about a particular tool or about a particular approach. And that's where we jump in to try and help everybody try to understand at that stage when we get to it is, what are those small things you want to do different to differentiate yourself, to bring a unique perspective to that topic.
Yeah, so the balancing, that sort of gets us through making the final program. And at that point, we start letting people know if they've made it onto the program or not. But at this point, one thing I did want to say, that if you don't get onto the program, it isn't necessarily because your proposal wasn't a fit, because we tend to have substantially more potential yeses than we have space for on the program. So any of those potential yeses that just through one factor or another didn't make it onto the program, we keep them in an alternates list. And typically where we use that is if someone cancels. And that happens reasonably often for any event. We tend to start planning these out about like 9 months before the event, and a lot can change in someone's lives. And so when someone calls us or emails us to let us know they've canceled, what we do is we go to that alternates list and we look for a session proposal that's as close to the one that canceled as possible. Mm-hmm. So for instance, if someone did a session on filming video with your mobile device and they canceled, the first thing we do with the alternates list is go, did anyone else propose something on doing video with mobile devices? And if they did, that's probably going to be our first choice for who we're going to reach out to about filling that slot. If we don't have a direct match, we start broadening out until we find someone who's close-ish. Mm-hmm. And in that case, then we'll just reach out to a person and say, hey, we have an opening on the program. We'd love to have you. We also look to use proposals that don't make it onto the program in other places too. So we do online events, and sometimes when we're programming those, we'll go, oh yeah, there was this really great proposal for, let's say, learning solutions, and we didn't get a chance to use it, but why can't we use it here too? So that's another place where a proposal that's great but didn't quite make the program could also find a new home. So Mark, we've got our first question in the chat. And we've been asked, in this balance, is the US versus foreign proposals, does that come into play when we're balancing things out?
The short answer on that is no. It's really about the quality of the proposal. It's looking at the perspective that's coming in. Of course, we know we have a large US audience and we have to be able to speak and meet that particular need. But we find that even the international proposals, folks from Europe and Australia in particular, we have similar circumstances in organizations and they're being addressed correctly. So it's not a matter of if you're from Australia or if you're from a European nation, you're going to be kind of put on a second tier. We really look across at the quality of the proposal, not where an individual is coming from.
We do, however, love getting international proposals. The more we can have an international view on learning and development at our events, the better. So if you're someone who is not based in the United States or not based in North America, we still really welcome you to propose because we'd love to have you.
Good question.
Yeah. So Mark, Let's maybe get into a few tips while we wait to see if any other questions come in the chat. What are some of the big things that you tend to see hold a proposal back that are easy to fix, that people could fix now before they even submit something?
One of the areas, one of the, I love case studies. I don't mince words. I do love my personal taste. If you like, when I go and to a conference, I love to see what's really happening in an organization. And I think we get a lot of case studies or things that are kind of positioned to be about an approach or a technology that was implemented in a particular setting, an organization, or an industry. And when those make it on the program, it's when those individuals speak to a broader audience. They make it very clear. So perfect example is, we might get a lot of proposals come from the medical area or hospitals or those settings. But if you're only positioning that to that audience, if you're writing to an audience that would be in a hospital setting, you're kind of limiting the potential for that topic. You have to remember that when you're writing this is beneficial for anybody who's using that tool or technique. And even though it might be in that unique specific area that you work in, you need to speak to the broader audience and how it can benefit them. How
Yeah,
about
and
yourself?
on a related note to that, because Mark, you're trying to get into a little bit of the what are you spelling out for people in your description? And we routinely recommend that people write as though they are speaking directly to the audience and include the kind of detail that they'll need to know in order to know if the session is right for them. So doing what Mark said about making sure that what you've written makes it clear, who the audience is and broadens out the audience, because people will self-select out if you're not careful, is important. Another thing to do, and this is something we see as a big challenge with proposals that seem like they're going in the right direction but are missing something to make them push them that last little bit, is specific detail about what you're planning to cover in the session. For instance, someone might go, I'm going to share my top 5 tips about how to design really engaging virtual classroom experiences. But then they won't tell us, even at a high level, what the tips are. And so what people tend to tell me is they do this because they think it makes it sound more intriguing, almost like a really good movie trailer. You don't want to give away too much. For writing a conference proposal, at least for guild events, you almost want to go the exact opposite direction of a really good movie trailer. You want to be a really bad movie trailer. Because a really bad movie trailer is that thing where you see it and you see every main story beat and you go, well, now I know everything that happens in the movie. That's bad for a movie trailer. When it comes to a session proposal and really spelling out for a potential audience what they can expect to gain from it, that level of detail is actually phenomenal. And it's not about giving away every single aspect of your session. And I think what you could cover in a session proposal and cover in an hour are 2 drastically different things. It's just making it super clear what real techniques and approaches and skills someone's going to learn so they know if it's the right fit for them.
Yeah.
It's also great for Mark and I, because when we're evaluating things, sometimes proposals will come in that sound very familiar at the surface. But then when you get into the nitty-gritty detail about what they're covering really, really different tips and techniques. I mean, you could easily have 2 sessions on main tips for doing virtual classrooms where none of those tips overlap.
Mm-hmm.
And so that giving us that extra level of detail, it helps us really understand your vision. And it also helps us not weed out your proposal because we think it might overlap with something else that it actually doesn't.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think, yes, number one, we want you to write to the audience that you're going to present in. We want to get a feel for how you're going to engage, but always remember that Bianca and I are kind of that first tier of that audience. We're trying to view your session as if the audience, because in the end, I mean, we will make modifications. There might be edits if you're on the program, but in the end, you're going to be in a block of anywhere from 10 to 17 other sessions. So it has to be very clear to that reader who's going to read multiple things to choose from. You got to get that point across in a very concise space. It's not impossible, because you have the opportunity in a narrative form, and you also have the opportunity in the objective section to kind of spell out a little bit of those 6 or 7 ideas or those tips. Those things need to be there so that we know you're coming with specific things that align to our audience and to the industry.
So we've got a question in the chat that asks, do we value audience participation? I think trying to get a sense of what kinds of sessions and session interactions we're looking for when we're looking at proposals.
You want to take the lead on that one?
Yeah, I would say yes. Yes, we value audience participation. As much as you can, the eLearning Guild event audience is really keen on engaging with the material, in trying things out, in discussion. And this is about knowing your audience. There are some events where people are much happier to take a more passive, sit back and hear someone talk for the whole time perspective. And that there's nothing evil or wrong with that. I would say, though, that if you have opportunities to involve the audience, questions, activities, interactions, that kind of a thing, that will add to your content, that aren't there just for funsies, but actually help people deepen their understanding or practice using a skill you just taught them. We really love having sessions like that. We also have a kind of session that not all events have. It's called a BYOD, bring your own device. And these sessions in particular are hands-on learning experiences where you're teaching someone to do a thing right there in the moment, and they are then doing the thing with the device they bring. So if you want to do a really interactive session, that's a fantastic option.
And if you have a standard, as Bianca led with that, I think, a standard presentation, a concurrent session, it is important. I think it's part of the whole learning equation to kind of pull people in the audience into your discussion, to engage them in different ways. It's 60 minutes. So imagine, it kind of comes back to that empathy. Do I just want to sit and listen to somebody talk, or is there ways to pull this in a much more conversational way? Of course, if it fits the content.
Got another question here asking if there are online sessions.
Yeah, we have online conferences. We've done some in the past where we have done some live streaming and played with that particular piece. But it's not something that we're doing a great deal of outside, inside the actual event itself. There is a lot of advantages to being there. If that's what I think I'm addressing the question, right? Do you see it differently?
Yeah. No, I would agree. I'm happy we have the online events because obviously sometimes people can't make it.
Yep.
Timing's wrong, location's just not right. So it's another opportunity to engage with really fantastic speakers. But the in-person events do not have an online component. I was talking a little bit earlier about the audience, and some people on the live stream might not know a lot about the eLearning Guild and who we serve and who our audience is for our events online and in person. Mark, what are some tips you'd have to help people who don't really know the Guild all that well understand who the audience they're trying to reach with their proposal is?
Yeah, so it's a wide spectrum of people that we like to group into the learning profession. So by titles, we have everybody from instructional designers to e-learning developers, but we can also have project managers and managers in that learning function. And of course, we definitely invite and create space for the higher level C-suite to be attending our events. We have our executive forum, which takes place at DevLearn. So like a wide spectrum from, like I said, all those functions within the learning space. The area we don't have and really don't focus a great deal on, which can influence a submission, is stand-up training. We're the eLearning Guild. We're designing these events for people who are producing mobile learning, e-learning courses, performance support, social solutions. But the training function in a stand-up kind of fashion is not the audience we have. And I also say, HR type topics are not necessarily what the Guild will be focusing on.
Yeah, I tend to explain it to people as eLearning Guild events play at that intersection of learning and technology. And when we talk about e-learning, we mean much more broadly than just course-based e-learning. We're talking about things like also online virtual classrooms, video, mobile learning, podcasts, games, all sorts of different digital experiences. So anything within that bubble. We also have a lot of instructional designers or people playing in the design development space. So sessions that touch on instructional design and as well as how that instructional design can be leveraged in a digital environment are fantastic. We also have a lot of management and strategy sessions related to learning and development. So proposals that speak to learning and digital learning from a strategic perspective, from an organization-wide perspective, are also really welcomed.
Yeah.
I do recommend, if you're curious about what we tend to cover, because I do see a question in the chat asking what our sessions tend to be about, do take a look at the website from the prior year's event, because you'll be able to see the different tracks that we have, the different sessions that we tend to cover. Those tracks in particular can help you really dig down into what the themes are at each event. They're slightly different at each event. We'll sometimes change them up a bit, but the core of them is very similar.
And in addition to the resources we provide, or this type of live, conversation about session proposals, looking back at past events gives you a good indication of what's getting accepted on the program, how it's written, how it's structured, the level of detail. So there's a good way of kind of gauging what you're putting together to where it might fit in. And also to recognize, are you going to be heading into an area that has a lot of competition for your topic? And work on making that slight modification, maybe going a little bit deeper into an area of a tool or approach to help build an audience for your particular session.
Yeah, another thing to think about is how much can you cover in a session? This is something that we tend to see with the proposals, because our sessions at our events tend to be either a 60-minute session or a 45-minute session for things that are on our main program, or a full day for workshops. And one thing that we look at when we're reviewing proposals is, do we feel like this would fit in with the time frame it's being submitted as? Because sometimes we'll look at a description and go, well, it's a really interesting topic, but there's no way they can deliver on everything they're promising in 60 minutes.
Yeah.
And that will cause us to sort of select out. Alternately, sometimes we'll look at a proposal and go, fantastic idea, I like where they're going, but I'm having trouble seeing how this spreads out over 60 minutes. Or for workshops, I get how this might take up part of the day, but how would this be the whole day? So really think about your time management and the limitations and benefits of whatever time you're proposing for, whether it's a workshop or a single 60-minute session, while you're thinking about what to include and what not to include.
Yep, good point.
So Mark, any other things that tend to jump out at you as easy things for people to polish up and fix in their proposals to help them stand out?
Yeah, I think we're touching on some themes, and I think one of the biggest that comes across, you've kind of already talked a little bit about this, is that level of detail and the idea of no cliffhangers, because again, who our audience is and what they're looking for as they select in this. That's one of the bigger ones for me, is understanding that somebody has a deeper understanding of this particular topic they're talking about. I like also, just to mention, I think sometimes humor can play well in the space, but let's be careful to remember that people are paying a great deal to come to the events and travel across the country and come in. So you want to be not spending as much of your energy on trying to craft something in an artistic way. You want to be as clear as possible and cut to the chase about what somebody's going to gain in this. So try and find that balance. I would lean a little heavier on being what is the practical, what's the intent, what are the takeaways, rather than try to be mysterious or intriguing or humorous.
Mm-hmm. Not that we don't love humor. We are a team that enjoys the humor, but the humor woven in with what are the key things people are going to take away.
Yep.
Got a couple quick questions that I can answer from the chat. We were asked about how if one of the topics that we have at our events is people analytics or ways to personalize and calculate ROI or sort of people data. Absolutely. We tend to have a data track at our events. It's something that we love. We know our attendees are really keen on knowing more about how to leverage data in meaningful ways and how to collect and use data. So absolutely.
Yeah, I would add that too. Yeah. Just to point out, I just had this conversation recently. There's a lot of technology out there about data collection, how to collect it, what can be used. XAPI comes to mind. But there is a hunger out there. There's a real need out there for people to better understand, have frameworks to use to be able to process that information and communicate that information in their organization. So if you're leaning on the data side, I think there's great opportunity there.
Yeah. We also have a question about our ratio in presentations. What's our ratio of presentation to Q&A? Quite quickly, you've got some wiggle room. What I tend to do as a speaker, and yes, Mark and I are both speakers, so we've been on the other side of this. I tend to budget for a 60-minute session about 45 minutes of session, and then around 15 minutes of Q&A, give or take. Your comfort level of where you put that Q&A is up to you. I tend to invite people to ask questions throughout, but you might feel comfortable, depending on what your topic is, having them at the end of the session. You can build in time at the end and then cut that back as people ask questions throughout. It's really up to you. If you want to do something, though, that is substantially Q&A, that it's really entirely, let's just have a discussion about a topic, what I do recommend is, rather than submitting that as a session, we have something called Morning Buzz. And if you've never been to a Guild event, it's a much more casual experience where the speakers for that aren't really speakers, they're more facilitators, and they propose a topic. Like the topic might be tips for doing visual design in learning and development. And then what happens is people show up for the session. They happen early in the morning at our events. And then the person who proposed the topic really just facilitates a conversation with everyone in the room. They don't have a slide deck. They don't have an agenda. It's really, let's all together share the knowledge. And the person who proposed the topic is really just helping the conversation along.
I'm going to go to your point before that, Bianca, the Q&A piece and the ratio there. I agree with you. If you're a newer speaker, it might be in your best interest to leave Q&A to the end and make that very clear at the very beginning of your presentation, just so that you know you can cover your content as you promised, because that's a big thing. As you become a more refined speaker, you can structure your presentation so that you have ample opportunity between sections for Q&A, and you'll pick up the tips on how to move along, politely within that particular session that you have.
Well, Mark, we're reaching the end of our time, so maybe we'll wrap this up with one final tip from each of us about how to make a really fantastic proposal.
Go for it. I'll let you lead.
Oh, okay. All right. So my tip is, between Mark, myself, and other members of the eLearning Guild team, we've put together a whole lot of support materials to help you make a great proposal and understand what we're looking for. So you've come to this event. That was fantastic. If you're watching this at a later date, thanks for watching the video. But there's other stuff out there as well for you. For instance, we always have Word versions of the proposal questions available. I strongly recommend drafting in the Word document, letting someone else review your proposal and working on the copy there before putting it into our submission form. We have a PDF document with a whole bunch of tips about making a great proposal and some examples and non-examples of what a proposal looks like for us, because I know this is pretty alien to people. Elsewhere on the eLearning Guild channel, there's a series of videos from Mark and I about common proposal missteps and how to fix them. They're very short videos, about 2 minutes each, and they're worth a view if you're curious about digging in a bit deeper to that. And yeah, keep an eye on the eLearning Guild social media channels as well, because we always share all these additional resources that can help you with your proposal. And reach out.
That's it.
Yeah.
Yeah, reach out. We have the programs at elearningguild.com email address that is extremely useful. For me, my final tip is in a word, empathy. You want to present, but you've also been an attendee. So it's really learning from your own experiences of sitting in and what works and what doesn't by other sessions. But also when you're putting together your particular proposal, be thinking about how somebody is going to read what you've written. Think about how clear your title is, because a lot of people might not move beyond that title. So if you can get as much information clearly about what somebody's going to experience in that session, what that session is about in that title, then you've already captured their interest to bring them to the body of the rest of the session proposal. Just really kind of put yourself in that attendee's shoes and write to that attendee.
Well, writing to the attendee is always a good thought. And so with that, thank you all so much for being here. Really happy to have people engaged with wanting to know more about how to do this. And as we said earlier, if you have any questions that we didn't cover here or that come up after, reach out. programs@elearningguild.com is a really easy way to reach us. And Mark and I are both pretty active on Twitter and LinkedIn, so you can track us down there as well.
Yep.
All right, everyone, have a fantastic day, and thanks for coming out.
See ya.